Joining me now is Trevor Loudon. Trevor, welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Brandon. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Trevor. Hey, I'm kind of going with a theme tonight, and that is the threat to America from Canada and Mexico. The threat to America from Canada and Mexico. Here is in the last few days, Mark Carney going to China, and here is what he had to say while in China.
Mine is the first visit of a Canadian Prime Minister to China in nearly a decade. The world has changed much since that last visit. And I believe the progress that we have made in the partnership sets us up well for the new world order.
Wow, the partnership Canada has with China sets up well for the new world order. Your thoughts on that comment, Trevor?
Well, yeah, Mark Carney is a globalist, a WEF man, and a socialist. So in China, the Chinese are communists and internationalists. So, yeah, absolutely. This is Carney telling everybody who he is and what he intends to do. And I think Trump might have thought about that before he basically made Carney the prime minister a couple of years ago when Paulevra, the conservative, was winning by 20 points, and Trump started talking about tariffs on Canada, making Canada the 51st state, and drove Carney into the office.
Mm. Well, I'm not so sure about a North American Union. Let me rephrase that. I am not for a North American Union. I am sure about that. I am not for a North American Union. But I am not opposed to taking over Canada or particularly Mexico, probably first, if these countries don't stop their infiltration into our country and their revolutions that they're helping to organize and or fund in the United States. Mexico is a narco state. We know they're in partnership with China. We know that Canada, we just saw Carney bragging about his close relationship now with China. Carney's opposed to our having Greenland and building the dome. That came out from the White House and President Trump tonight. Well, of course, if he's in bed with China, then obviously he's going to say, no, we can't have Greenland to build a dome to protect us from missiles coming from Russia or China. In fact, in my commentary tonight, Trevor, I was basing my commentary largely on an article by Peter Schweitzer. It was titled, How Mexico Works with Militants on U.S. Soil to Foment Unrest, Illegal Immigration. Of course, a lot of this is based on his new book out called The Invisible Coup, and that's subtitled How American Elites and Foreign Powers Use Immigration as a Weapon. And I ordered the book. I'm going to read the book. But he said that back in May in Oklahoma City, there was a meeting that took place. And Peter Schweitzer, detailed what happened. He said it was in the Mexican consulate. And that at the Mexican consulate, there was a group of Mexican diplomats. And they brought in their diplomats from across the country and the different consulates across the country. From, he said Phoenix, Little Rock, Los Angeles, Atlanta, San Francisco, Orlando, Chicago, and Boston. And he said their goal was to deal with immigration policy in America. Purpose was to coordinate what he described as citizen activism and collective action inside the United States tied to immigration policy, including developing what he calls a plan to resist enforcement and oppose immigration restrictions. Now, that is a foreign government that is coordinating militancy and movements inside the U.S. I don't know how you could describe that as nothing less than a national security threat. This is what's going on with Mexico.
That's an act of war.
Yes.
You know, look, we've had two communist presidents in Mexico in a row, AMLO and now Sheinbaum. They are involved with the Sao Paulo Forum, the Cuban-run organization. And you notice that now that the energy supply, the Venezuelan oil, is cut off to Cuba, where are the Cubans getting it from? They're getting it from Mexico. Mexico is a communist enemy of America and should be treated as such.
Yes.
And the borders should be immediately closed. And American businesses should be repatriated back on the side of the border, because it's going to not be long before they're confiscated by the Mexican government anyway. So, we should treat it as an enemy belligerent nation on our southern border. And unfortunately, Canada's moving into the same camp.
Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not for North American Union, but I have no problem with the idea of a greater America. If these governments are going to be taken over by China, by narco states, look, if you're talking about going and grabbing the leader of Venezuela, and people can argue about that, if you're talking about getting rid of the regime in Iran, if you're talking about by the end of the year getting rid of the leadership in Cuba, which I have no problem with that because they're right in our hemisphere and being used as a port in our backyard, 90 miles from Florida, then I think we need to seriously start having conversations about going ahead and expanding America's borders and just taking over Canada and Mexico. I say we start with Cuba, then Mexico. I think if we don't, we're going to look back and realize that Mexico will have become a major launching point for further aggression and attacks on America, which is already happening with the CCP running fentanyl up here with their precursor chemicals for the cartels.
Yeah, look, Lenin said the road to revolution in America runs through Mexico. The communists, the Soviets, the Chinese, the Colombians, the Cubans, the cartels, Hezbollah have all been exploiting an open Mexican corridor for decades, and it's absolutely appropriate. I don't really want to get into a shooting war with Mexico, which would involve, it's 120 million Mexicans, but the border should be sealed. And the Mexico should be put on notice. If you don't stop your drugs, if you don't stop your communism, if you don't kick the Chinese and the Russians and Hezbollah out of your territory, the borders will never open again. And that would wreck the Mexican economy. And, we've got to take a hard line because they are out to destroy us. There's no question about that.
So you believe that Mexico has become an enemy state?
Yeah, it's not becoming. It has been for a decade.
Look at this headline. Breitbart News. Mexico created Migrant TV to coordinate migrant political action inside America. Migrant TV to coordinate migrant political action inside the United States. Again, more information coming from Peter Schweitzer in his new book. Quote, in 2024, mobilization of Mexican assets for American elections was the order of the day. The Mexican government launched a television channel called TV Migrant TV, and beamed it out to the tens of millions of Mexicans living in the United States, end quote. Quote, while the programming featured some practical advice, the government-funded channel also bombarded the audience in the U.S. with political messages. The channel ran glowing videos about Kamala Harris. On the other hand, they fed migrants a diet of reports on candidate Trump's fake news and lies. They also repeatedly played the migrant anthem as a call to arms for migrants living in the United States, reminding them to do their duty for their country, end quote. I don't know if you've read this book, but I've ordered it. I'm going to be reading it. This sounds like a really important national security topic.
Oh, look, Schweitzer does a great job, and there'll be lots of things that we don't know in there. But look, I've been saying this for years, that this is what Mexico's doing. They run Spanish language radio stations all through the Southwest, pumping out Aztlan, Reconquista, communist propaganda 24/7, and have been for probably 15 years now. So this is nothing new, but it's obviously amped up since Trump's come on the scene.
Schweitzer says the American media failed to report on the Mexican government's massive interference in American domestic politics. While the news reports of Russia buying Facebook ads and running social media campaigns have garnered cries of Russian interference, Mexico's far wider and more aggressive efforts are ignored. Indeed, Mexico and other foreign actors have become particularly assertive in their involvement in American internal politics at a level that would not be tolerated if the United States were doing the same in their countries. Rather than denouncing this foreign influence, American progressives have embraced it, all in the name of resistance to Trump, end quote.
Yep. 100% correct.
So that's Mexico. And again, we know that they're digging tunnels nonstop into our country. They're about as fast as they find them and close them down, and another one opens up. And we've gotten strong reports that the drug cartels are working with Islamic terror cells to drag weapons into the U.S. This is stuff
they've been doing that for 20 years.
Exactly.
You know.
So at what point are we going to treat Mexico as big a threat as we see Iran or Venezuela?
Well, hopefully as soon as Trump reads the book. Look, it can't come soon enough. Mexico, and I'm not criticizing the Mexican people, but Mexico has been run by communists and narco-terrorists the communists for the last 6 years, and narco-terrorists for God knows how long before that, and been working with the communists and socialists. And, you know, this has gone back since the 1920s. The communists have been using Mexico to attack this country.
Here's another headline from Breitbart I put on the Worldview Report tonight. Iran using Venezuela to install drone technology in Western Hemisphere. We've talked since about 2008 about missiles potentially from Iran being there in Venezuela. Now we've got drones. And of course, we know northern Venezuela is not far from Miami, 1,264 miles or so as the crow flies. It looks like our enemies are really preparing to have beachheads here in the U.S. Are they planning on war on our soil in America?
100%. The Chinese said World War III will be fought on American soil.
They said that?
Yeah.
And you believe Mexico will be heavily involved in that, along with Venezuela?
Yeah. Look, they have been bringing Mexican and Russian troops into Mexico for many, many years, since at least the 80s and 90s. There's bases down there. Yeah, they absolutely are going to use Mexico as a staging post for infiltration and attacks on this country.
What would you do? You've already laid out a little bit of what you would do if you were advising the president. What would you advise him regarding Canada and their ties now with China being bragged about so strongly by their leader, Carney, who says that their relationship, Canada's relationship with China, is going to be the basis for the new world order? What would you be advising President Trump to do when it comes to Canada, particularly with President Trump putting out today on Truth Social? Mark Carney is opposed to us having the Iron Dome in Greenland, which I think we need because we're seeing that a great piece at Gatestone. This is a major shipping lane. This is also, of course, the missiles coming over, intercontinental ballistic missiles from Russia or Iran or China coming over. We need this, not to mention all the minerals. And some of those minerals are needed for building military hardware.
Yeah, and that's all true, absolutely. But we got to understand the existing northern American Canadian system is what guards us from Russian missiles coming across the North Pole. So Canada already plays a massive role in America's protection. So what this move does potentially is basically make us completely vulnerable to Russian missiles across the polar regions, because we were relying on Canada as part of that. And now through just bad policy, Canada's elected a communist, basically, when we could have had a conservative. And now we're going to have a major problem because of it. I'd say Trump needs to get very tough on this, but not appeal to the Canadian people. Say, look, we will welcome Alberta. We'll welcome relations with Canada, but stop this communism. Stop this globalism. Get rid of Mark Carney, because we cannot deal with a communist. I would be very explicit about it.
What did you make of what was coming out of the World Economic Forum? Not the Great Reset, the Trump reset. He seemed to be just smashing globalism and implementing a new vision by Trump, including the Global Peace Board, which has got me a little concerned by some of the people that are on it. But he does seem to be saying this basically is going to do what the UN should have been doing and kind of replace the UN. What do you make of what just went down?
Well, I'm very hostile to the UN, and I'm always take joy whenever I see them taken apart. But, I'm not very keen on this idea of this global board of peace.
Me neither.
Because they're talking about having Russia and China on it. That's like having Hitler and Japan and Italy on a global board of peace after World War, just after World War II. It's insanity.
So we get we get good decisions and good moves, and one day and the next day we get something where that we're pointing out, like this peace board. I mean, it's kind of back and forth. Of course, it beats the Kamala Harris regime ever having gotten in there. But
Sure.
I wish President Trump had better advisors around him that could help him really understand some of this stuff from a historical and worldview perspective. The Bible says that it's a good thing to have a plurality of advisors to seek out those who have wisdom and understanding and knowledge. I just wish President Trump had some better advisors. Would you agree with that?
Well, I do. There's far too many pro-Russian advisors around Trump, far too many, and not enough of the Marco Rubios and Keith Kellogg's who bring a bit of sanity to the situation. Look, I'm a big fan of Trump on domestic policy, pretty much, but on foreign policy, I think he's gone way off the reservation on many issues. It's squarely on Trump that Canada is now ruled by socialists. Square. That is Trump's doing. He did that, and he should own that. And now we have to deal with the consequences of that. And he's got to do something about it. He's got to be very tough and but not alienate. Like Bibi Netanyahu when they bombed Iran, he said, "We are not against the Iranian people. We want to help you to rise against your rulers." He should be appealing to the Canadian people, say, "We believe in your values. We all believe in freedom. Stop electing socialists. Let's work together against the Chinese and the Russians. And, let's form a more perfect union, not necessarily political union, but let's work together against our enemies." But he seems to be more interested in dividing. And now we have a big problem as a result of it.
Look at this, TrevorLoudon.com. You can find all of his great books and articles there. TrevorLoudon.com, TrevorLoudon.com. Final question. So would you be shocked in 5-10 years to look back to find out that one of the greatest national security threats to America is Mexico?
No. I think I've been saying that for years. No, I wouldn't be shocked at all. I think it's a massive national security threat.
I mean, can you imagine what our enemies? I mean, there's a lot of shipping containers coming in and out of their ports from China. I got a report here tonight that is China is Mexico's second largest trading partner. Can you imagine what it is they could be bringing in and out and putting right at our border? Not to mention the drones and how small they are now.
You imagine the trucks going across the border every day. If every one of those, if 10% of those, 5% of those trucks were each carrying 30 troops, you imagine what damage they could do in one day to this country.
I just don't think Mexico is talked about enough. And again, I'm not against the Mexican people. I'm sure they would love to be liberated by their narco-terrorist government. I mean, because every time somebody tries to run for mayor and go against this, they literally end up with their head chopped off and on the top of their car. We've showed those pictures. Every time they get elected, within 48 to 72 hours, they're dead.
Yeah, look at 100%. And look, we want Cuba to be free. We want Venezuela to be free. We want Mexico to be free. But we want the people to stay in their countries and not cross our borders illegally. We want to get rid of the communists in the areas so the people in Latin America can live safe and prosperous lives. That's in our interest, is it not?
Yeah.
Why would we not want that?
In other words, the Monroe Doctrine or the Don Roe Doctrine. We cannot let Russia or China or Iran be setting up the equivalent of military bases or terror proxy cells, making their home base in countries right on our border to kill us, and then say, oops, I guess we should have been paying attention to that 10, 15 years ago after it's already too late.
Yeah, when there's, 20, 30, 40 million illegals here, many of whom are still loyal to the governments they came from or actually soldiers of the governments they came from.
Can you believe that they're meeting in consulates in in, I think he said Oklahoma, but they're coming from those Mexican consulates all over the country here of America to talk about how to deal with our immigration policy. Like you said, I think that's an act of war. I agree with you.
Yeah. Oh, look, it is. But look, the Venezuelans are doing exactly the same thing.
And the CCP.
The Venezuelans are holding meetings in Chicago with the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which is the pro-Chinese communist group that organized the George Floyd riots and organizes the anti-ICE riots now in Minnesota. And they're meeting with the Venezuelans all the time with nobody saying anything.
And I read an article today, before I let you go, Trevor, that the DSA, Democrat Socialists of America, the CCP, different communist groups, they're all working, obviously, with all these anti-ICE demonstrations in Minnesota.
Yeah, they are. Look, people need to get it through their heads. So we've had foreign infiltration of our elections, our right. Look, the LA riots were worked on by the communists. The riots in the 60s, the Cubans were heavily involved. We have had communist agitation, foreign directed on our soil now for 60 to 80 years. And it's only gotten worse. So we're going to wake up to this at some point?
Yeah. Are we going to wake up? I don't know. Otherwise, I keep thinking we're going to see a replay in real life of the movie Red Dawn from 1983, 84.
Yeah. Yeah, that was based on a real Soviet war plan, the invasion aided by the Cubans and Latin Americans of North America by the Soviets. That was based on a real active Soviet war plan, that movie.
You mentioned something a while ago before I let you go. The rumors about a foreign military staging or practicing in Mexico or even Canada. We had the Chinese practicing, I think, up in Canada at one time. What about Mexico? Any of these foreign governments stationing any kind of military hardware or practicing down in Mexico?
Look, there's garrisons of Chinese troops in Mexico for a long time now. There's been reports of bases down there for many, many years. This is nothing new. They've been forced that training down there. The whole goal of Russia and China is to destroy and occupy the United States. And why would you not use Mexico for that when the border is porous and the drug cartels can help you out and nobody does anything on our side? Why would you not do that?
100%. And now we're reading tonight about another story. I don't know how you say her name. Masia Al-Majad. She's the woman that spoke not too long ago, I think before the UN. We played her clip. But they've tried to kill her. The Iranian, she's a liberal, but she's against the Iranian regime. She said, the FBI just informed me that on January 28th, I will once again come face to face with yet another man who tried to assassinate me on U.S. soil. The man was hired to kill me at a university in Connecticut where I was scheduled to give a talk about the situation in Iran. He was recruited by Farhad Shakari, an IRGC agent who was involved in a separate assassination plot against President Trump. This is the true nature of the Islamic Republic, a regime that is massacring people right now inside Iran, having killed up to 20,000 people while using the same terror networks to hunt its critics abroad, no matter where they are. So here we go, Trevor. IRGC. We knew this. We've had federal trials for several years now showing the IRGC is in our country working, and now we see they're trying to assassinate people that speak out against the regime. She would not agree with you and me on many issues politically, but we would agree on major issues related to Iran and Islam and the Ayatollah. And here she keeps having assassination attempts against her. Can you imagine what's going on with groups and carousels and people that are hired, either Russian mobsters or Russian guys? I think at one point she had that. She had a group of Russians that were hired to come after her by the IRGC. At some point, voices like ours could start disappearing with hit jobs.
Well, I've already threatened to assassinate John Bolton and Trump and Mike Pompeo. So do you think they'd be worried about us? Do you think they would have qualms about taking us out, Brennan?
No.
Yeah, we got to understand that these people are here. They're at war. We have there's an Iranian spy ring working right now in the Department of Defense, and the National Security Council was exposed under Biden, and those people are still there. So, let's get serious about this.
100%. TrevorLoudon.com. There's the website, his books. I highly recommend all of his books to you guys. Stealth, his book, House Un-Americans. And I think he has one called, I've interviewed you on, the senators, what is it called? National Security Risk Senators or something?
Yeah, security risk senators. I profile about 40 currently serving U.S. senators with their ties to Russia, Iran, China, Cuba, etc.
Yeah, here they all are. Right on his website, folks. There you go. Stealth, House Un-Americans. This is a 6-part series, that is. And there it is. Security Risk Senators. That's a 2-part series. TrevorLoudon.com, TrevorLoudon.com. As always, Trevor, thank you for being with us.
Pleasure. Thanks, Brandon.
You too, Trevor. We'll be right back, guys, after this break.
Bye.